Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We see the problem. No one likes to talk about domestic abuse and domestic violence. It's a taboo in the community. And just being in the session, when you talk about domestic violence or abuse, that means you're also guilty by association. So let's get out of here quickly. That's one of our biggest problems in our communities. We don't like to talk about these things. It hurts. It really hurts to admit that we have these issues in our communities. But why? We're just humans. Before anything else, we're humans, and humans make mistakes. Humans, they do things wrong, right, subhanAllah. It depends on the attitude and the akhlaq and the manners. But I expected, to be honest with you, I expected the room to go empty. I mean, subhanAllah, the morning session, we didn't even have enough seats for people. And now, more than half just left. Why? Because, alhamdulillah, we don't have a problem. Yeah, that's part of the problem. And alhamdulillah, even if you don't have a problem in your own household, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make your households built on love and mercy for one another, Ya Rabbil Alameen. But even if you don't have it in your own household, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the community. It does exist in the community, and it hurts. It hurts us as imams as well too. SubhanAllah, it hurts as imams, because as an imam, it's not my job to be that full-time counselor for the people in that context, in that actual capacity. But you find yourself forced into filling in when there is no probably other source for many people to do so. Alhamdulillah, we have different venues right now in our time, in our communities. But again, it hurts us to see that the community is going into troubles. It hurts us to see that children are suffering and falling behind, subhanAllah. And as a result of that, a lot of cases of divorce happened. So it hurts us. There's no doubt it is a crisis in the community, and we need to talk about it. I really praise you for your courage, for your dedication, and for taking the time to come and learn. Even if it's not for you, at least come to learn about your community, inshaAllah tabaraka wa ta'ala. So we're going to talk about domestic violence and spousal abuse in particular, hopefully with the purpose not to focus on the problem, is to focus inshallah hopefully on the solution bidnillahi azza wa jalla. Now regarding, just to understand domestic violence and spousal abuse and so on, domestic violence is usually, it's a pattern of behavior. It's a pattern of behavior people display in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, in order to take power and also take control of the situation. That's what usually how we define it, in a loose kind of definition of domestic violence. Husband, wife, for example, parent and a child. You have a very strong connection with each other, and eventually one of the two parties, regardless who's the stronger in the relationship, take advantage of that and they abuse the other party. Sometimes, and usually when we talk about domestic abuse, I'm sure that all of us envision what, Jama'ah? The man being the assailant and the woman being the victim, which is true. For the most cases, absolutely, that is true. But we do have other cases in the community and elsewhere as well, where the woman can be the strong partner in the relationship, and she's the assailant and he's the victim. Like one time I learned that lesson the hard way. I gave a khutbah on domestic violence and spousal abuse. And subhanAllah, all the focus of my khutbah was obviously towards the most obvious, that men should take care of the women, and taqillah, your sister, your wives, this and that and so on. After the khutbah, alhamdulillah, was a beautiful khutbah, was in Ramadan even. A brother comes to me and says, Sheikh, your khutbah was amazing, was beautiful, may Allah reward you for it and so on. So I said, okay, alhamdulillah. He goes, but you missed one point. I said, yeah, what is it? He goes, what about if the woman was the abuser? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he starts giving me his story. I'm like, you know what, you got a really point, a strong point. I apologize, I should have actually made it very clear. And subhanAllah, I had to qualify from that moment and on. Every time I talk about domestic violence, I have to bring into the table as well the discussion that sometimes the abuser can be the lady. So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration as we discuss the subject of domestic violence or spousal abuse. Now, in terms of statistics, basically, I want to ask you right now, how many of you know somebody in a toxic relationship that has to do with domestic violence or spousal abuse? Raise your hands. Raise your hands again. Thank you very much. But allow me to say, I don't think so. Because there is more. But no one wants to raise their hands, because when I raise my hand, we gotta look, hey, who is it? So as Muslims, we still have that culture of shame that preventing us from facing the reality that I know somebody who's dealing with domestic violence. It's my neighbor. It's my sister. It's the brother who comes to the first line in the masjid. It's this place or that person. It's more than just the number of hands that raised actually in this kind of session. Actually, subhanAllah, we're going to mention some of the statistics afterwards, inshallah, but it's really more than what we think. The problem with domestic abuse is more than what we think. Also, when it comes to somebody calling you for help, I want to hear from you right now, as a member of a community, member of your family. If someone calls you for help and they say, my spouse is beating me, my spouse is threatening me, is this and that, what is the first thing you most likely will do or will ask? What's the first question you will ask them? Let's be specific and be actually more realistic. A lady calls you and she's crying, she's scared, she's so afraid, terrified from her husband, losing control and so on, and she's asking you basically what to do. What is the most likely question people will ask her? What would it be? Yes? What did you do? Thank you. The most common question woman is asked when she comes to complain about her husband's behavior. It's just like this first issue, what did you do? But what is the more appropriate question to ask a jama'ah? The first question you should ask a lady call you for something like this. What would it be? Did you call the police? Well, that's a little bit ahead of, one step ahead. Before that, there's another more important question, jama'ah. What is it? Say it again. Are you safe? The most important thing you need to ask about is, are you safe? Because safety and sanctity of life transcends above everything right now. One of the main objectives of our deen and our sharia is the preservation of life. No matter who the person is, high profile, low profile, even who was the imam himself, whatever that is, the first question you ask someone who's calling you for help is just, are you safe? And if they say, well, yeah, I think so, alhamdulillah, I'm okay, then alhamdulillah, the second question is okay, would be what? What happened? An objective question. What happened? Tell me. Because if you ask, what did he do? What does that mean? You took sides. Right away, you took side. It's not fair either. I need to know what happened. So eventually we need to make sure that we approach the situation productively in order just to kind of like, take sides and ruin everything and make it even worse. Because a lot of people that I ask them, subhanAllah, when they come to me for counseling, if you have contacted the authorities or this and that, or they went for counseling, many of them, they complain that the counselors don't understand their culture, with their background, what they were looking for. And the first thing that they see that the counselor is trying to empower them to get out of that relationship right away. I said, I don't want to leave my kids, I don't want to leave my husband. We just went through a rough patch. I understand. But safety comes first. The most important thing. Safety comes first. If they were safe, alhamdulillah. If they were not safe, then you ensure that they're safe. Whether by making sure someone to pick them up and take them away from that place of danger, or if not, then you call the authority, whatever that is required. But it is very important that we maintain that healthy, inshallah, relationship and that safety. Now, regarding the statistics in our communities, unfortunately, we see that there's about 82% of the cases of emotional or cases of domestic violence and domestic abuse, spousal abuse, comes actually as a form of emotional abuse, emotional and verbal abuse. The number one and highest reported abuse in our families in the Muslim community is emotional and verbal abuse. Like what? What do you guys think? How does it come? How does it come out in the relationship? Huh? How? So you always basically kind of like commenting on their looks or their skills. Like, you know what? That's nothing. That's nonsense. You do this? You call this good? So you criticize the way they look, the way they speak, the way they talk, the way they do things, and so you're always putting them down. That's what they say. They keep putting me down. No matter what you try, you keep putting me down. Sometimes the words themselves are not hurt. They're not actually vulgar language, but they're very hurtful. Very hurtful. Even if you think that you're funny, you can't joke about these things. It's also hurtful. So emotional verbal abuse is the highest that we see in the community. The second level of reported abuse in our communities actually is the physical abuse. The physical abuse. And the physical abuse is more actually from parents to our children than from spouse to one another. Because it seems that parents, they take liberty, discipline their children in a way that is way beyond what is acceptable, even by the law. And it becomes more into a domestic abuse case. But there's still abuse, domestic and physical abuse between a husband and wife. It happens. And obviously when we say between a husband and wife, we know that it's more that the husband, the assailant, and the lady should be the victim most of the time. The third form of abuse, spousal abuse, it comes in the form of what? Finances. Financial abuse. You know how many couples I met, and when I asked the lady about one of the things that worries her in her relationship with her husband, she goes, I have no idea how much he earns. I have no idea how much money we have. I have nothing. Every time I ask him to know exactly how much he makes, how much he saves, he asks, what do you want? You tell me, I'll get it for you. What do you want? You want a credit card? Here you go, it's the credit card. You just spend from this and don't worry about anything. It sounds sweet and beautiful to give her mashallah, blank check to go and spend as much as she wants. But that doesn't solve the problem of insecurity. Because one of the basic things of any relationship is to feel safe. And part of it is I need to make sure that my future is being secured. Yes, you're telling me, trust my words, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, I understand that. But I also need to make sure I have a tangible asset in my mind. I know numbers, I know how much you earn. I'm part of the financial plan that you have for the future of the family. But a lot of men, unfortunately, a lot of men, not all of them of course, a lot of them, they keep this as a red line. The wife doesn't have to know how much you earn, how much you save, and if you even have an offshore account, even or anything like that. Nope, that's none of your business. Your business is to get your money, I'll give it to you, enjoy it, and that's it. But not all, of course, financial controls are considered abuse. Don't take me wrong. Not every financial control is considered abuse. But it becomes abuse when now the person tries to control the finances and the spending and everything else around money. So she doesn't have the right to buy, she can't buy freely, and even sometimes, the lady, she complains that even when I use the credit card, he keeps monitoring what I spend and what I spend that for, so it becomes suffocating. So that becomes an offensive kind of behavior. Then we have other forms of abuse, and at 30% actually comes the sexual abuse. At 30% comes sexual abuse. And it does happen in the Muslim family, and unfortunately, I would say, I don't want to say it's becoming more frequent, but I start getting more frequently questions and scenarios from families dealing with sexual abuse. Now, that does not necessarily mean that it's increasing. Maybe it's just now we're having the courage to talk about it. We're just having the courage to talk about it. Before that, it was completely taboo. For a girl to come and say, I was abused, when I was young by my father or my brother or my uncle, this and that, it was just like a taboo. No way a girl will bravely come out and talk about this to a stranger, a counselor or an imam or something like that. But today, they have the courage and they say, you know what, I want to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with it. Help me out. What can we do with this? So that's another actually crime that also needs to be dealt with in order to remove the offense and also give people closure in the dunya before the akhirah. So that's one of the things that we have at 30% as sexual abuse. Now, interestingly, whenever someone goes through spousal, let's say, abuse or domestic violence or abuse cases and so forth, who would be most likely the first person to call for help? What do you guys think? A friend. They would call a friend actually. And when they want to go to somebody to help them out, meaning when they go for counseling, for example, who would be the number one most likely person they go to for counseling or for help? That's where they go to the imam. The more traditional a community, the more likely to go to the imam. The more traditional community, the more likely we go to the imam. Why? Because for us, the imam will understand our culture, understand our background and its emotional state. Also, they're going through a faith crisis in that same moment as well too. So they want someone to kind of boost their iman because they want to know, why is this happening to me? So it's a qadr issue as well too. There are a lot of reasons why they go to the imam. And that's something we're going to need to talk about as well too, because if the imam is qualified or not. Sometimes it's not the best person for you to go to, by the way. But at least we need to bring this issue, because the imam in our community is viewed as, mashallah, superhuman. He's the sheikh, he's the leader, he's the teacher, he's a spiritual guide, he's the counselor, he's this, he's that. And not everyone is trained to become that superhuman being. How does it look like? How do you know that someone that you know in the community is going through domestic violence or spousal abuse? Because we, as Muslim community, are responsible to detect these things. And everything has symptoms. When you see signs of abuse, you need to report them. You need to actually at least to pay attention to it. So I want to hear from you. What do you guys think? What are the more common signs you know that someone you know, whether in the masjid or in the family, they're going through some spousal abuse or domestic abuse? Like what? Huh? Somebody said something? Change of behavior. What kind of behavior that changes? They become withdrawal. They become withdrawn and less talkative. And when you come and talk to them to get them out of it, they just kind of like brush you off. They don't want to talk about it anymore, right? So sudden change of behavior. You know them to be jolly, happy, excited people, and suddenly just like, wow, what's going on? Suddenly they change their behavior. What else? Yes. Isolation. Like they withdraw and isolate everybody around them. Yes. So they disappear. They start disappearing. Why do they disappear, by the way? Because they know if they're going to go out, what does it mean? People, they will ask, and they're going to have to talk. And they don't want to talk to people about this issue, so I'd rather actually disappear. This is basically, it's a common actually practice, because when you feel disappointed and you start feeling the pain and get angry, because you're dealing with a lot of uncertainties about yourself right now, about relationship, so that leads to an anxiety, that leads to fear of the unknown, and we start getting into that level, you start becoming numb, and you go into safety mode. That safety mode is a building resentment first. You build walls of resentment around you, and you bury yourself in there. Why? Because if I have these thick walls, no one can go through. So you want to just protect yourself. But you don't live in isolation, so people will see. So what happens? They're going to come and ask, hey, are you okay? What do people usually do in this situation? They, what we call actually flame throwing. Like you throw flames at people who come and ask. Because if someone asks you, you feel obliged to drop your guards down, allow them in, and have this conversation. And for you, that's what made me vulnerable in the first place. Nope, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep my guards up and burn everybody around you. So people start systematically acting mean as part of changing the behavior, systematically acting mean. You know when a child acts nasty? It's not because he's just kind of like acting nasty because he likes to be nasty. Sometimes it's actually acting systematically mean as a mean of self-defense and protection. So make sure that when the spouse or the child is acting and behaving in that fashion, that's something to detect that could be possibility of domestic and family abuse. Another sign of course, of that is people always feel intimidated. Like they always look behind you, their back and their shoulder. Even when you talk to them, what do? Just like shh. They want to keep quiet about everything. They don't want to get into troubles. That's another sign that they're very intimidated. They're so scared. They can't even talk freely. SubhanAllah, they can't even breathe freely. So that's a sign that you should really detect if there's someone going through this. When it comes to some people, they're used to be blamed so much that they develop a very visible low self-esteem of themselves. Like no matter what you try, how you try to promote, higher self-esteem, they always go back again to that kind of attitude. No, I'm not worthy of this, I'm not worthy, because they've been blamed so much, they've been attacked so much that they don't see self-worthiness at all. Also, one of the visible signs that we see today is talking about suicidal thoughts. Because some people who feel that they're trapped in a relationship, no one seems to understand, no matter what I try, no matter what I do, and they start talking about suicide. That's a very serious situation right now. And alhamdulillah, at least we have many actually services in the Muslim community. We have hotlines and emergency lines where you could just call and bring, inshallah, the right help to the people, bidnillahi azza wa jal. Now, why do people attack others, assault others in a family? What's the purpose of that? Let's try to understand this. What is the number one reason for people to be assailant in a situation of spousal abuse or domestic violence? Do you guys know? Huh? Power struggle, but what exactly they're trying to get out of it? Control. They're trying to take control. It's all about controlling the circumstances, right? But why do people try to take control? People always resort to try to take control when they fail with their communication. If you don't communicate well, because what's the point? What's the point of communication anyway? The point of communication is removing all the uncertainties and all the doubts you have about the relationship. When you communicate, you share information. And we mentioned that in the previous session, said that when you don't talk to people, people build what? Assumptions. What kind of assumptions do people build usually? Worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. And I mentioned that in many different examples actually. So I give you this example right now. Let's say if you guys decided that the weather is going to nice outside, let's go and take a walk. The moment you take a walk outside of the house or the place, suddenly a dog starts running at you. What do? What is it? See, the very common answer is run. Why? Why do you run? You got hurt, right? Because fear of what? See what happened right now? I didn't even give you any description of the dog. I just said a dog running at you. And you made what? What kind of assumption did you make? A monster gonna eat you alive. I did not tell you any details. You made all the assumptions. I only put you in an uncertain situation. What if it was a chihuahua? Now it's funny. Why? Because I removed the uncertainty. I removed it for you. I gave you information. Limited your imagination right now. But with the uncertainty of the relationship in your life, there are a lot of uncertainties. People communicate to remove uncertainties, so they can at least have a good relationship with each other. When communication fails, people usually go to control. Because I'm not going to waste my time on this. These are the variables that leads to the uncertainties. Let me take control of them. I push them this way. They give me this result, inshallah ta'ala. That's the assumption. Why? Because if I control the situation, it's good. So, but what we don't understand, you have your hand in the controllers. They have their hands in the same controllers. You push this way, what do? Push the other way. And we keep into friction. And when this gets hot, those who have some issues, what do? They take the control in the most violent way. And that's where mostly the control comes in. Everybody wants to take control of the situation. And the one who has more, of course, tendencies to control or abuse become the more powerful and take over into the relationship. A second reason why people they go into domestic abuse and spousal abuse is many of it is coming from financial pressure. It's a common reason. It doesn't justify, no doubt, it doesn't justify any form of bad behavior, subhanAllah. But they say financial. When I say financial, what it means exactly? They don't even have time to talk. Just working on making livings. Which is why we have it more in the domestic abuse, obviously, in poverty, under the poverty line. There are a lot of people basically go through this than those who are more affluent. Why? Because again, everybody's busy making living. They don't even have time to make life out of it. That's why they keep doing this the easy way. Just get rid of it right away. The third reason probably is history of it, which means maybe the person is traumatized. Comes from an abuse already from their family. They're scarred. So when they come, they have absolutely no other pattern except what they've learned to see and watch. They grew up in an abusive household, and the only thing they do is this. So that's why they take this kind of attitude. In a story about Medina, one of the ulama one of the governors of Medina actually, he had a case when a father comes to him complaining about his son whipped the father. So the son whipped the father. And the father got hurt because I raised my son to become a man, mashallah, become a shepherd and take care of the animals and the camels and this and that. And that's how he rewards me, that he beats me. He hits me with that spell. So he went to complain and he asked the governor to take his haqq from his own son. So he asked the father first. He told him, he says, by the way, did you send your son to study the Quran and the Arabic and this? And he goes, no, we're shepherds, we're desert people, we don't do these things and so on. Okay, did you send him to the Kutab so you could learn the adab and the akhlaq and the etiquette and how to deal with you and so on? He goes, no, we're Bedouins, we don't do these things and so on and so on. So whatever, the governor was asking the father what his son learned, The only thing he found that he learned is how to manage the cattle. He says, you know what? لَقَدْ عَقَقْتَ وَلَدَكَ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَعُقَّكَ. Like you being undutiful to your son before he became undutiful to you, because he learned only when a cow or a bull refuses or rejects, you just whip it to bring it back into line. And that's the same thing. That's how he treated with his father. When his father said no, he just kind of like whipped him. So when kids grow up in a household where they only see violence and as the norm, when they get married, unfortunately they go back into familiar places. And that's the familiar behavior they come with. Again, it doesn't justify that. But that's why many people complain. They say this is what they don't know anything else. The third reason, or the fourth reason actually, would be alcohol and drugs. Alcohol and drugs. And by the way, these reasons I'm mentioning to you right now, they're coming from statistics from the Muslim community. So alcohol and drug. In the Muslim community, yeah, it happens, unfortunately. Even in the Muslim community, the alcohol and drug can be a reason, unfortunately, for the crisis and the problem that we have in today. And number 5, mental issues. Why mental issues scored number 5, by the way? It's not because it's not scientifically accurate or not right or this and that. No, it's becoming right now, the Muslim community is opening up right now about it, and now we're talking about it. We're having conversations about it. Because before that, we always brush it off, and we always just keep hush-hush and make it taboo, and don't even talk about mental issues in the Muslim community. Because it's a disgrace, it's fadiha, it's a shame, it's this, it's that. No one wants to admit it. But now because people are admitting these issues, and people come for counseling, suddenly right now we have statistics. It's not where it might be the most accurate yet, but at least we're talking about it, alhamdulillah, openly. No matter what kind of abuse people go through, what reasons they justify their abuse with, the damage will always happen. And sometimes the damage is, subhanAllah, irreversible or irrevocable at all. No matter how much you try to fix a situation, it cannot be fixed. So be careful, Jama'ah. Now, what do people justify their abuse with, specifically between a husband and wife? I'm talking specifically about physical abuse. Now, the physical abuse, a lot of people, they usually love to quote Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, ayah number 34, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء, and then at the end, in the middle of the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قال واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن. The ayah that many people, they love to quote, and Islamophobes, they love to quote as well to see, look, Muslims, they promote domestic violence. In the translation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and as for the women, it means your wives, for whom you fear nushuz. The word nushuz in the literal translation is more like saying like rebellion. Like when they rebel and they reject you and they give you that attitude that is beyond the normal, of course, between a husband and wife. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَعِظُوهُنَّ. First of all, admonish them, which means give them the reminder. You talk to them, remind them, ittaqillah, this and that. Give them the time, take time. And if it doesn't work out, then the ayah continues and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهْجُرُهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ, which means forsake their beds or forsake them in bed. You stay away from the bed. And I know a lot of women today say, alhamdulillah, I'm good with that. So it doesn't really bother me. But again, it might be for some families, that's a kind of like an emotional thing, like maybe she can reflect on this, she might lose her husband and this and that, and her children. And then if that doesn't work, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَضْرِبُوهُنْ. Now the word وَضْرِبُوهُنْ, this is where we have the debate that's going all over the world. It's just like, look, the Muslims promoting domestic violence and so on. What's the meaning of وَضْرِبُوهُنْ? I know, a lot of people try to use the word وَضْرِبُوهُنْ, say, hey, listen, in the Quran, being Arabic, the word وَضْرِبُوهُنْ actually means to leave them and travel and stay away from them and so on. That's a very now modern actual interpretation of the ayah. I disagree. I disagree because the solution is not to actually put our heads in the sand and brush it off and say, no, you guys don't understand the Quran. We need to understand the way it is and then deal with it. We deal with it the way it is, but we're going to have to have the better understanding of it, obviously. So the ayah says, وَضْرِبُوهُنْ. Ad-darb in the Arabic language means actually to strike, to beat, no matter what you don't say, it's there. But let's try to understand what Allah says here, subhanahu wa ta'ala, what the Prophet said about this as well, and what is the actual fiqh in Islam tells us about this kind of attitude, this kind of behavior. So the ayah says, وَضْرِبُوهُنْ. And because the darb means to strike, it doesn't give any measurement in terms of how heavy, how light, and so on and so. So we see it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why we say the ayah adribun means actually to strike them or physical discipline in the situation? Because some of the women complained to the Prophet ﷺ about their husbands after the revelation of this ayah. They said, Ya Rasulullah, some men, they took liberty, they don't understand what they're doing, and that's what's happening today. So Rasulullah ﷺ, when he heard that men, they're actually, literally, they discipline their wives physically, he was surprised and shocked. He goes, قَالْ لَيْسُوا أُولَٰئِكَ بِالْخِيَارِ. These are not good men. These are not good men. And guess what, Jama'ah? These men right now, you might justify this with the ayah. But the man who received the ayah, he said, these are not good men. Which means, even if it's there, it doesn't mean actually you should exercise that. And the ulama, they say, when it comes to now the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, he himself, he never, according to Aisha radiallahu anha, put his hand, salawatullah wasalam alayhi, on any slave or wife or anybody, salawatullah wasalam, in a hurtful way. Never. The only time, with some people they try to quote this hadith as though, look, the Prophet ﷺ, he was physical with Aisha one time. So let's talk about this physical thing that you're talking about. What is it? The only time we know the Prophet ﷺ, maybe he used his hand, was, I don't want to say in self-defense, but I'm going to explain to you the situation, you judge for yourself. So Aisha, she said, one night the Prophet ﷺ was sleeping with her, and he was waiting for her when she fell asleep, or at least he thought she fell asleep. Look how tricky that could be. So he thought she fell asleep, so he got up, put his clothes on at night, and he left. Now I ask every woman right now here in this room, if your husband leaves at night, where do you expect him to go? Jama'ah. Remember that there's actually a commercial. I don't know if you guys have seen that commercial about State. I think it's State Farm, the commercial. Yeah, the guy, he was, speaking downstairs, and he was, quietly speaking, and then his wife comes, who's there? And he goes, she took the phone from her husband. Says whatever his name was, Mike or something. Says, Mike, what are you wearing? She says, khakis. So the idea is that every woman would suspect her husband to go somewhere else. So for Aisha, she suspected the Prophet ﷺ going where? To another wife. So she put her clothes on and she goes after him. Back then there was no GPS trackers, So she went after him at night. And she kept going behind the Prophet ﷺ without him noticing her until she realized the Prophet was heading towards Al-Baqi', the cemetery in Medina. So he went there, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he stood by the Baqi' and raised his hand and he made dua for the people of Al-Baqi'. He made dua for the deceased. And when he was done, he turns around, comes back again, heading home. Heading home towards Aisha, who was just hiding and waiting for him to see what is he going to do. When she saw he was going back same direction, now she's in trouble. So she turns around and she starts walking quickly ahead of him. Now in the middle of the night, you don't expect anybody to be outside. And the Prophet ﷺ, he thought he would be alone. And now suddenly he sees a shadow moving in front of him. So he starts, going faster to catch up with this person. Aisha, she hears the Prophet ﷺ's pace going faster. She starts running. By the time the Prophet ﷺ, and Hadith in Sahih Bukhari, by the time the Prophet ﷺ, he enters the house, he sees Aisha standing and she's catching her breath. He was so upset. He was really offended. Like a man when his wife takes his phone, she wants to check, what's on his phone. He's just like, really? Right? So the Prophet ﷺ was offended. And he goes like, was that you? هذا أنت? So obviously she understood from his question and his tone that he's what? He's upset. Aisha, now that she's the one who made that mistake, it was her fault, right? What would she do? She wants to make up with him before he gets upset, right? Even more. So what does she wants to do? She went to him to hug him. Because she knows the Prophet would not resist her hug, right? So as she went to the Prophet ﷺ to hug him, the Prophet wasn't ready yet. So he puts his hand in the middle, in between. And as she was rushing to hug him, his hand came in the between. She kind of like hit her on the chest. She hit herself on his hand. And even she said that it hurt me. Basically, why? Because she knew that was her fault, right? And the Prophet just like, no. He's like, I'm not ready for this now. قال أخشيت أن يحيف الله عليك ورسوله. Like, are you serious? You think Allah and His Messenger is going to be unfair to you? Is that what you're suspecting? I'm going to go somewhere else? That's what he was saying, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, it's not about us saying, who's right and who's wrong in this scenario. But this, some people, they say, you see, the Prophet ﷺ hurt Aisha. I said, yeah, the Prophet didn't hurt Aisha. This is something happened between husband and wife. She's jumping to, trying to apologize, trying to hug him. He puts his hand, she kind of like felt the pain and the push on her hand, on her chest. That's all. So no one can use this hadith to justify this domestic violence. Or saying, you see, the Prophet ﷺ, he used his hand. No, he didn't actually hit his wife, salawatullah wa salam alayhi. And even the Prophet ﷺ who heard this, who received this revelation as well too, he never did it. As a matter of fact, he was asked, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he said that if anyone is going to do this, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ضربا غير مبرح. The word غير مبرح means a striking that doesn't hurt. And what does that exactly mean? The point of it is not really to leave any physical damage or physical hurt. It's actually the emotional part of it. Like really? That's what it means. And that's why the ulama in the law of Sharia, aslan, if a man hits his wife in any way that leaves mark or serious actually in any way, it's considered serious right away. And he can be sued for that, Islamically. Which is why we say to husband and wife today, if anyone goes into actually domestic violence to the extent where their physical discipline is happening in that fashion, don't hesitate. You don't call the imam, call 911. And I'm saying it from this place over here. If anyone gets into a situation like this, they have all the right, even shar'an, to really call the authority to protect themselves. And then you can deal with the imam afterwards. But dealing with the authority, that's your haqq to protect yourself and guard yourself, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Now, fiqh-wise, the ulama, they give the description of how to do it, where to do it, but I don't want to go to the details really over here. But just to give an idea on why is it not supposed to be even actually a matter of beating and so on. But because in the English culture, we have so much domestic violence over here. So when people read about it from the Muslim perspective, the only thing comes to their mind is what they have in their own culture. Although if you look in the books of fiqh, they say if anyone is going to even be physical with their children even, says your elbow should not go away from your body. Like your elbow is stuck to your body. So how is that going to be anyway? How are you going to hurt? It doesn't hurt, but it's just a matter of bringing order, that's all. Also, in Imam ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, and bringing all the evidences and all the talks of the ulama on the subject, he finally concluded that this is actually considered karahatan shadida. And it means that's like it's not like it's mubah or mustahab. No, it's actually makruh. It's disliked, it's discouraged, and you're not supposed to practice this at all. Now, the need for counseling. Do we need counseling? Absolutely. Is it even permissible in Islam Jama'ah to do counseling? It's in the Quran. It's in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the same context of talking about this discipline in the household, He said subhanahu wa ta'ala, قال وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا إِنْ يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. He said that if you fear shiqaq, which means dissension between them, and it's going to cause to separation and so on, فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. Bring an arbitrator from her side and her side. Arbitration back then, this is the normal thing in the tribal system, family system network. That's how people solve their problems. They go to the elders and they bring the elders and they talk on their behalf, and that's it, alhamdulillah. This doesn't work here anymore, Jama'ah. A lot of people, when they have issues with their spouse, they want to do it the same old way. They go to, talk to your mom, and my mom let them solve the situation. Or your dad and your dad let them solve the situation. May Allah bless your parents. Maybe they are the best people for you. That's fine. But it's not the only way. It is not, again, it's not the only way to solve the problem. As a matter of fact, we have better actually way of solving it today. Go to professional counselors. Go to professional counselors. Is the imam a professional counselor? Why are you so biased, Jama'ah? Is the imam a professional counselor? Not necessarily. If the imam is qualified, if the imam has a degree in counseling, mashallah, bismillah, go for it. But if the imam doesn't have it, they only considered pastoral counselors. Pastoral counselors are those who use religious, principles and spiritual principles for healing, dealing with these issues. But they do not necessarily solve the problem for you the way you need it. And I highly recommend for the brothers and sisters who go through serious domestic violence that they really go to professional counselors. And alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, today we have so many centers for counseling, alhamdulillah, in our communities, so many, mashallah, Muslim counselors around the world, around the country. And if you cannot do it physically, you could do it even online. They are licensed to do it online as well too. Alhamdulillah, you can do that. That's good. Fine. But we have a crisis in the Muslim community regarding counseling. What is it? Number one, our Muslim community is very biased against counseling. Do you guys agree or not? We're very biased against counseling. Adding to this, we're very biased against what kind of counselors? Before that, female counselors. Even if she's hijabi, and jilbabi, and niqabi, and whatever you want to call it, you still have people who are biased against female counselors, unfortunately. Now, adding to the problem is that the non-Muslim counselors. Now, do we discourage people from going to non-Muslim counselors? Honestly, maybe it's the best option you have. I don't know. I'm not going to limit you. But is the non-Muslim counselors the best for you? Wallahi, it really depends. Because I had some people who went to non-Muslim counselors and they benefited a lot, mashallah. Others, they say, you know what, was a bad idea. Like one gentleman in particular, he came to me one time, he said, Sheikh, don't send anybody to a Muslim counselor. I said, why? Because he came out of a bad relationship, it didn't last long, so he felt, kind of like heartbroken, and he couldn't get over it easily, so he went to this non-Muslim counselor and asked him to help them to have closure and move on. So the counselor told him to go to the bar and have a few drinks and pick up a girl and just move on with your life. So the Muslim guy, he goes, but I cannot do this, I'm Muslim. He goes, well, I'm your counselor, I'm telling you, go and do it. He goes, that was the end of it, I never went back to him. So that is, it could happen. It doesn't mean for everybody. And alhamdulillah, I know that a lot of actually people who work in corporate America, they do have free access to these counselors. It's paid by your employer. So you don't have to worry about expenses actually. So something you can take advantage of, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. But our imams, they're not necessarily actually most qualified in this. Also, our imams don't know about the legal liabilities. They don't even know. So they might give you the wrong advice and say things might not supposed to say in these situations. So be careful with that. What do you need to work on, inshallah ta'ala? As a community, for us, we need to acknowledge the problem. Don't be complacent in this situation. Means don't stay always quiet. You need to acknowledge the problem, talk about it, bring awareness, and I hope inshallah you bring professionals to talk about these issues in your masajid, like we talk about salah, siyam, and Ramadan. We talk about family issues, domestic violence. Talk about it, bring awareness inshallah ta'ala, and stand against the aggressor. No matter who the assailant is and who the victim is, we need to stand always for justice inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. As the final advice for all of us inshallah, because I want to open for Q&A, make sure as an individual to educate yourself. Educate yourself. Educate yourself in the deen, in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, in the practice, the etiquette and the akhlaq and the manners, and be preemptive, which means learn to behave better before you have to deal with behaving actually that way. Husband, wife, they asked me if you would like to give me one golden advice, the most important advice you would give me in my marriage, what would it be? Because they asked me, what is the best quality you should acquire in order to have your relationship good? I said, no matter how much romantic you think you are or mashallah generous you are, the number one quality you need to take care of in a relationship is your good manners and akhlaq. Good manners. That's it. And good manners, just the perfect meaning of good manners. What does that mean? If your spouse says something bad to you, what good manners tell you to do? Reply in that which is best. If something is missing in the relationship, what does your manners and akhlaq do? Be generous. Take initiative. Be the better person. Always that. But they don't deserve it. It's not because of them. You deserve to be the better person. No matter what. So good manners is the number one thing, inshallah, and hopefully that will help us, remove a lot of these problems, these issues we have in our relationship. And finally, I want to leave you with this action item, inshallah, for you as a husband and wife. One thing that solve a lot of problems for us, may give us a shortcut to the solution and get out of a vicious cycle of spousal actually abuse and so on, is what husband and wife always complain, the absence of it or the lack of it from the relationship when they have troubles. What is it? Love? Okay. Like when there's a problem, when something happens. The wife always complains when something happens. Her husband, he would never do that. What is it? There you go. Apology. Two things a man have hard time pronouncing. I'm sorry and I love you. He starts choking when he says that, basically. Like sore throat right away. But It's funny because I know a lot of the men, they say, Sheikh, astaghfirullah. You know I love my wife, but I don't have to tell her that. Actually, today you do. You should. But speaking about apology, how is apology considered important? Because it's a shortcut, wallah, a shortcut to solve most of your problems. It's a shortcut to solve most of your problems. So how do you make your apology effective? Because most of our apologies are actually completely messed up. Yani. We don't apologize. We need an apology from our apology. Aslan. So how do you make your apology effective apology? 5 steps for that. Number 1, I want you to write them down, guys. If you have a phone, write them down, inshallah ta'ala. And start practicing this at home, bidnillah azza wa jal. Number 1, icebreaker. What's the meaning of icebreaker? When you talk to your spouse, use that pet name that you have for each other. And if you don't have one, Allah al-musta'an. Create one. So what do you guys call each other at home? Honey, sweetheart, pumpkin, whatever that is that you call each other. Use these fun names, Jama'ah. If you don't have any fun names, please use one. Because in some cultures, no, you cannot do these things. You have to call her by the most professional name. Muhammad, Abu Abdullah, this and that. Jama'ah, just use something different. The Prophet ﷺ used to call Aisha radiallahu anha, he used to call her Aish. Yeah, Aish. That's like saying in our culture, saying Ayush, basically. Like Zainab, for example, you call her whatever, Zuzu, for instance. I have my daughter, she's named Bushra, we call her Shushu. And Dima, we have other names for her too. We used to call her pet names. I even one time I had to call the nurse hotline. She asked me, we used to call her Tattoo at the time. Her name is Dima, but we call her Tattoo. Why, I don't know. But eventually that was her name eventually. So the lady, she asked me, what's your daughter's name? I paused for 30 seconds trying to figure out her name, wallahi. I couldn't remember her name. Because we call her Tattoo, I'm just like, it's not Tattoo for sure, but what is it? Masha, she's 9 years old right now, alhamdulillah. But you have to have pet names for each other. So use an icebreaker, like honey, sweetheart. Number 2, when it comes to apology, then you need to be precise and mention specifically what you're apologizing about. What does that mean? Say, honey, sweetheart, last night when I said XYZ, so I'm specific right now. It was last night when I said, and I said it, right? So you be specific. Don't use vague things, honey, people sometimes say things, blah, blah, blah. Those not, no, say it, you said it. It's not people say things. No, you talk about yourself. When I said this and that and so on. Or when I did this and that and so on and so on. Number 3, then you come to the word of apology and be specific. Like you say the word, I'm sorry. You say the word, I want to apologize to you. So for example, honey, sweetheart, yesterday when I said such and such yesterday to you, I want to let you know that, that's absolutely wrong. I apologize. I'm so sorry. It sounds great for now, right? Then number 4. No buts and ifs and howevers. Don't negate your apology. What does that mean? Most people, after they apologize, they negate that apology by trying to justify that. Like saying, however, you have to understand I didn't mean it really. It's not the thing that I usually say. But don't give justification. Even worse, they say it by blaming you for it. Like saying, but please, don't, I don't like to get angry. Please don't make me angry. I hate these things, blah, blah, blah. Now you're actually blaming the victim. And that's another crisis. So therefore, please don't say however and so on. So just say, I'm sorry, I want to apologize. And the last one, you give them right now a moment to redeem yourself. By saying, therefore, please tell me, how can I make it up to you? I want to make it up to you. Tell me, what do you do? But don't ask for $10 million bank account, offshore bank account. Eventually, you just, something reasonable. Subhanallah, I've taught a lot of actually couples those tricks about effective apology. Wallahi, it works like magic. It works like magic. So today, as you leave, inshallah, this room, please take your spouse on the sides. Look into the eyes of each other. Think of a most beautiful pet name that you know for them. If not, create one right now on the way out. And then call them. And then say, hey, remember 10, 15 years ago? I want to apologize to you. And whatever, right? Okay, to apologize to something that you think it's worth really just moving on away from bidnillah tabarak. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill your lives again with love and mercy for one another and keep you, Allah, safe in this dunya and the akhirah. Wallahu ta'ala.
What are the signs of abuse and communication, and how do you even address it if someone is emotionally abusive in order to try to change the situation?
I'm not sure if the person attended the morning session. We had a whole hour actually on communication skills. We talked about the bad and the good communication skills. Usually communication, it fails because communication has 3 layers. We said that the first layer is basic communication, like you have to have a space and time and language for it. People don't communicate because they're too busy. They don't even have time to set for themselves to talk and deal with these issues. So eventually you have to create that time for it. The second thing we said that has to be with connection, which means you connect with your spouse in a way that is meaningful to your spouse, not just to yourself. Many people, their communication fail because they want the communication to go their way. And we said that when a man talks, he focuses on what, Jama'ah? On the content. And the woman focuses on the context. And as a result, they never connect. And that's why you need to make sure that you focus on, at least try to understand the other side, not understand your point of view. Which is why I hear it a lot from husband and wife when they talk in front of me for counseling. They say, but you see, he doesn't understand. You see, you don't understand. Exactly, that's my point. Because we're not focusing on the same thing. That's why everybody trying to push their way on the other person, and it doesn't happen. So we have to think about it. And the other thing is synchronizing. Like husband and wife, they have to be in the same goals. They think, together for the next 2, 3, 5 years. And if they don't have the same goals, they're going to always have problems. They're going to always fight over this issue. So communication definitely is very important to solve any problem, including getting away, inshallah ta'ala, from domestic abuse and domestic violence. Wallahu a'lam.
The next question is any online counseling or family counseling contact information you can provide, as well as a hotline for suicide.
Okay, so this is not my field to come and tell you about, because each city has its own Islamic centers, has counseling centers. Like I know you guys have Khalil Center over here, for example, in this area. Also, not every professional counselor is licensed to counsel online. So therefore, you need to go to certain websites where you know that they have the license to counsel actually online. And differentiate between professional family therapists and family counselors, and also pastoral counselors. Like an imam, I'm more like a family coach. So you are allowed, you don't follow the same rules of the professional counseling. So therefore, it's different. But every city has its own actually counselors, and if someone wants to go across the country, then you go to many websites available, inshallah ta'ala, and if anyone needs something, it can give you, inshallah ta'ala, specific ones, but privately, inshallah. Now, and by the way, I just want to refer to Dr. Umar Rida, actually, he's here. He's the author of the book, Untangled. He's a professional family counselor, alhamdulillah. You can talk to him, inshallah ta'ala. We'll help you with that, bidnillah. Sheikh, would you raise your hand? Jazakallah khair. Barakallah feekum, inshallah ta'ala. He's in Portland, actually, just to let you know. Now.
The next group of questions is related to people that know about the abuse that's taking place, whether it's their family or their friends. How do they reach out? How do they help them? That's the first layer. The second layer, if they're in the situation themselves and they're unhappy and it's abusive, there's kids involved, how do you handle that? So how do you reach out for help or inform others, and how do you take care of it yourself?
So once again, we repeat, the most important thing is what, Jama'ah? Safety. Safety comes first. No matter who the person is, no matter how long the relationship was, for 10 years, 15 years, 20, 50 years, whatever that is, safety comes first. That's the most important thing right now. And if the person who's asking the question feels that they are in an unsafe situation, they need to actually go and report that quickly. If the is the fastest way to save themselves is to talk to authority, don't hesitate, call right away. Don't wait, call 911. Get yourself, inshallah, in a safe place, binillah azza wa jal. If the matter is not that urgent, which means it's not a serious safety issue right now, it's just a miscommunication, misunderstanding between husband and wife and so on. If that what the situation is, then we can negotiate how to go about that issue. And I always recommend to contact, inshallah ta'ala, a family therapist to give you the lead on how to do that. If someone is asking you for help, and you know that they're unsafe, guess what? And they tell you, please don't tell anybody. What do you do in this case? You go and tell somebody. Even if they tell you, don't tell anybody, and you know that they're unsafe, and the situation is dangerous, you go and tell someone to help. If it requires the authority involvement, you call the authority. But my friend is going to lose a relationship with them, honestly, their safety is more important than my relationship with them. I'm willing to sever my relationship with them than cry my life for the rest of my life for something really happened to them. So that's something I want to make sure that you guys understand, inshallah. Other than that, hopefully, inshallah, they reach out to counselors and they will help them how to go through.
The next question is relating to the rest of the family causing problems for the spouses and how to handle that. They're kind people, but they just keep advising the wrong way, which increases the problems.
So basically, in better words, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law situation. Yani. What do we do if the mother-in-law keeps involving in our life and give us advices and so on? That's something you should understand, subhanAllah, based on age factor. See, as adults, we age in phases. Phase 1 is from 17 to 24. That's what we call the learning phase. So you don't have filter. You're still young. You're reckless sometimes. You want to explore and get involved in risky sometimes adventures and things in life. So you do a lot of things. So there's no filter really. And we're very selfless at the same time. Until we hit 25. When we hit 25 to 34, we go into another phase called the filtering phase or the editing phase. Like you come out with a huge reservoir of experience, and now you want to filter this because it's not all water anymore. So you start filtering your relationships, your ideals, your goals, your principles, your whatever that is, right? But that is becoming a very selfish phase. Why? Because it's all about editing. I want to do things meaningful to myself. By the time you hit the 3-0, you go into the final cut, which is why it becomes the sharpest actually editing phase, and that's when most divorces happen, unfortunately. Because if they could not reconcile their roles, they take divergent paths, and that's why they separate. So once you hit 35 to 44, you go into one of the most stable phases of your life, called the mastering phase. You're supposed to have figured out your life in the previous phase, so you know the order of your role in life. You hit 35, you hit the ground running, which is why most people, they quit their jobs and they make a startup company, or they want to become, have their own clinic, or go back to school to get a master's degree so they can specialize for the rest of their life. That's what they do in that age group. When you hit 45 to 54, you go into harvesting phase. And that's kind of like emotional phase. You look back, you realize you're not going to live longer than what you lived already. And now most of those on this phase is like, subhanallah, right? We all know that. We're in this phase right now. So you look back, you want to see if your life was worth it or not. And if it wasn't emotionally fulfilling, you regress. You go back into editing and retrospect, in which we call it today midlife crisis. So if your husband starts driving convertibles or Harley Davidson, there's some issues there. So eventually, when we hit 45, actually 55 to 64, which is most of the mother-in-law's age group, in that age group, 65 basically and up, we call this the guiding phase. What does it mean? Life is shrinking around them. They're becoming the elders because everybody else is dying, right? And when now they start becoming like this, everybody's getting busy with their lives, they are now want to find a space for them. Where will they find that space? In the extension of their life, the life of their children. And as a result, they want to tell their kids, hey, we're the experts. Let me tell you how to do it. We don't ask for advice, and you don't have to. They give it to you anyway. So the mother-in-law, the father-in-law, when they come and give you the advice, they don't really mean to hurt you. They don't mean to put you down or make you feel that you're worthless, whatever that is. It's just their way of finding space in your life that, hey, I can be of a value to you. Listen to me. Put more spices over here. Don't do this, don't do that. So, but obviously, when the younger one who wants to explore on their own meets someone who wants to give you advice, whether you like it or not, what happens? Friction. And that's where we have the problem between these family members. Wallahu a'lam.
The next question is relating to community religious leaders. If they have taken advantage of their students sexually, how does the community recover from that? As well as advice telling the person in an abusive relationship how to be patient, and that this is rather than avoiding divorce.
So let's first of all talk about the community issues. I know a lot of people don't like to talk about these issues, but the Muslim community is not immune from what we see in other faith groups, communities, whether it's a Catholic church or any other church and so forth, subhanAllah. Still, the Muslim community is not immune. We have some serious issues with that, where some Muslim leaders, spiritual, or actually some spiritual leader, or even not just imams, but they could be in the leadership position. They unfortunately make many mistakes, And they're human beings as well. They take advantage of their situation. And in this case, they might abuse someone, if you want to call spiritual abuse, although that's very loose definition for the meaning of spiritual abuse. But in essence, really, spiritual abuse is nothing more than someone on a spiritual position take advantage of someone's spiritual vulnerability, and unfortunately, they take advantage of that in a sexual manner or otherwise. That is now a serious damage that happens, subhanAllah. Not just for them or for the victims, it's also for the entire community. So how do we recover from this? I personally believe that an open conversation about it is the best thing to do. Why? Because people, acknowledgement, we have to acknowledge this. Always saying hush, hush, and no, don't talk about it, don't, we're afraid that the kids are going to lose their faith, they're going to lose Islam, they're going to leave the masjid. You know what? Allah is the one who will preserve this deen. Not you, not I, not anybody else. So if this requires from us to clean up the mess, then we'll do it. And Allah will bring another generation that is better than my generation and your generation to preserve this deen. Our duty is to do the right thing. And if one leader did something wrong like this, that requires to be actually reported, we report that. If it's required to be fixed and talked about in the community, we'll talk about it in the community, inshallah. And then we do the awareness, and we do, of course, the therapy for the community, and eventually we come to a closure, inshallah ta'ala, and resolutions. And we move on. We're not going to keep dwelling about it and debating, no, we shouldn't have done that, we should have done that. It's not going to come to an end. Let's need to move on this issue, inshallah ta'ala. As for the victims, they have the law, of course, on their side, and the community on their side, inshallah, to support them and help them, bidnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. Naam.
And last two final questions. The first is related to the parents and their children, how to discipline them without hitting them. And the second one is regarding financial responsibility. If you can discuss what the responsibilities are for the men and women, and if just expenses are paid, is that enough?
Hold on a second. We'll talk about how much the man is responsible to spend in the household.
He's religious and pious, however, the finances.
Because many of these questions are actually, here's the thing, many of these questions, they're not necessarily fatwa-based question. They're more like litigations. Because the question has an accusation already. My husband is stingy, my husband's not spending enough, or my wife, she's spending too much, this and that, and so on. So the answer is already in the question. You're already actually given the answer. So if these questions, I don't recommend you ask a question openly like this. If it's a serious situation, it's a subjective case, talk to the imam or the counselor or the person personally so you can have more information about it. Otherwise, I might give a vague answer, a general answer that doesn't actually fit you, and then eventually everybody takes it on their own way. These kind of questions, they're not fiqh, they're not fatwa questions, they're litigations. We call them in the Arabic language faddul khusumat, and they require that you answer them and take care of them properly based on their own circumstances. Wallahu a'lam.
And the other part was parents to children.
Expenses?
No, not expenses, but in terms of discipline and without hitting them.
Okay, that's a very long actually discussion right now in the last minute, but obviously, I don't know if they have another sessions on parenting in the program. Do parents have the right to discipline their children physically? Well, the Islamic, if the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith, he mentioned that. But again, the same concept of discipline like we talked about it with the spouse. Not that discipline that actually hurts the child. And if it does, you can be sued for that. And it's even legal. I don't know about the state of Illinois over here, but for us in Texas, we're Texans, you know that. So they do that stuff. And obviously they have a law for this and they have rules for that. That parents, they are allowed to discipline their children, like spanking, that's what it means. Anything more than that, and anything that leaves any marks and so on, so is actually considered an offense, can lead the person to trouble with the law. But they allow parents to be parents. That's the thing. But to go beyond the norm of spanking and disciplining the children, that becomes abuse. Like yelling at the kids, for example, threatening them and shaking them and do anything like that, or even hurt them in a way that it actually leaves marks, subhanAllah, that is no longer actually discipline, that's a crime now. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh Yaser Birjas.